out to you is to have you understand that we're not talking about background checks as a new item in Virginia. Virginia has had a criminal background check system in place since 1989. In fact, I was here in 1989 when the bill was passed with NRA support to establish the first, what was called then, an instant background check. What House Bill 2 does, though, is to amend that current system to make for a universal background check. For what we find is that the current law is interpreted as applying only to purchases from licensed federal firearms dealers. And now we're talking about all sales and all transfers to be included in the criminal background check system. It's interesting to me how the current system works. And you need to know that we have the first criminal background check system in the country, and it's an exemplary system that other states look to as to how it works. In 2018, listen to these numbers, if you will. The state police conducted 446,333 criminal background checks. And it's amazing to me that when that number of almost 500,000 background checks were conducted, 1,779 denials were issued for people for arrest because they did not qualify for purchasing a background check, purchasing a firearm. What it says to me is that even with the current system saying you have to go to a licensed federal dealer, there's still nearly 1,800 people who don't qualify to purchase a firearm under existing law. What we're now talking about is the state police expanding that system to take first. And if you take a look down the bill, you will find that it establishes a universal is a key word, background check system in Virginia. It's expected, it's thought now, although the statistics aren't clear, that probably half the sales in Virginia now are result in a criminal background check. The other half of people are made in private sales, gun shows without licensed federal dealers, and so on. It would require criminal records checks for all firearm sales and transfers, including sales originating online, sales at gun shows, and all private sales. This bill accomplishes the goal by mandating that any person selling, renting, trading, or transferring a firearm must first obtain the results of a background check before completing the transaction. Additionally, it enables the Virginia State Police to create a process by which private sellers may obtain transaction approval or denial from a federally licensed firearm dealer. The bill contains, as you might expect, several exemptions of the process that do not relate to commercial sales of firearms, such things as gifts, changes among family members, and so on. Those are enumerated on page 8 of the bill.
Please wrap up, Delegate Plum.
Excuse me?
Please wrap up.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. So that is the bill. It's an expansion of an existing program that's been highly successful to include all firearm transactions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Plum. Anyone here to speak in favor of the bill, please line up at the podium. And 3 minutes total for those who speak in favor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brian Moran, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, and we are very much in favor of this bill. Delegate Plum has carried this bill for a number of years and did, once again, a terrific job in its presentation. I would just remark a couple of points. There are the gift to immediate family is on line 395. That is provided for, as is a number of exemptions that follow the immediate family exemption. The onus is on the seller. It's a Class 6 felony if you're not doing the due diligence for the background check, and then if it's a purchaser, it would be a Class 1 misdemeanor. And I would just underscore, state police do a terrific job. They're one of the best in the nation tracking down those who would file false information on trying to purchase, and that's almost 3,500 are trying to purchase illegally from a federally licensed firearms deal. And so just how many private sales guns are landing in hands of those who should not have them. So if we're concerned about people who should not have a firearm, this is the bill, and I would certainly encourage its support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Heather, can you hold the time? Delegate Davis.
Thank you. If we want to ask a question of a speaker, is now the proper time?
At the conclusion of all the speakers, you may ask a question of them during that 3 minutes. Yes, thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Toby Heitens. I'm the Solicitor General of Virginia. The Attorney General strongly supports this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Goddard, Virginia Center for Public Safety. This is the 13th year that I've come before this committee asking for background checks. I've tried everything I have in my knowledge and everything else to try and convince you. Today, I'm simply going to say that 92% of Virginians support this. The green button you're going to press represents 92% of Virginians. If you press the red button, you're saying you represent the balance of 8%. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. Dana Schroeder on behalf of the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. We have a longstanding position in support of universal background checks, and we support this legislation.
Good morning, Lori House with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We support the bill.
Nancy Spooner, Moms Demand Action. We strongly support this bill. I'm here for Sean Moss, whose life would have been saved by this law.
Good morning, Kelly Roscom with the Educational Fund to Stop Gun Violence. We strongly support this bill.
Good morning, I'm Molly Voigt with Giffords, and we strongly support the bill. Thank you.
Christian Heine with Brady, and we strongly support this bill.
Hi, Julia Sabanowitz with the Virginia Catholic Conference. We represent the Catholic bishops and their Diocese of Virginia, and we strongly support this bill.
Christine Payne, I'm a member of the Virginia Nurses Association and the League of Women Voters. I support this bill and ask you to do the same.
Is anyone here that hasn't spoken that wants to support the bill? Good. Thank you. All right. For those that want to speak in opposition to the bill, please line up for the podium. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Yes. Philip Van Cleve, President of the Virginia Citizens Defense League. We oppose the bill. There's quite a few reasons for that. One thing I noticed is, of course, has the issue with if two people go hunting and one loans a gun to the other, that won't work because they have to stay continuously next to each other, or there's a felony involved there. But the current system works best for gun owners because ultimately we don't want a gun registration in Virginia. And right now, because private sales don't have to go through the background check, the government doesn't know exactly what gun somebody has, which is exactly what we want. If we do the universal background check, the next step will be universal gun registration. We've seen this state after state. So we strongly oppose this. We think the system we have now is sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Bob Sadler, South Richmond. The one thing this bill fails to take into account is the black market. Now, why in the world would a law-abiding citizen who's towed the line all his life associate with a criminal organization? Well, they're not going to put you on a government hit list, and not going to care how many items are on a collector's wish list. The black market wants to make a quick buck and disappear. They won't hassle you after the sale. If I learned anything in my 10 years from lobbying for VCDL, it is that you people will never leave us alone. The only way to escape from you is being piled onto boxcars and sent to camps.
Will Shaw, don't represent an organization. I live in Louisa County. I have a couple of concerns about the bill. One is the draconian Class 6 felony. I mean, we're going from something that's perfectly legal and acceptable to something that's suddenly illegal. I think a Class 6 felony it's excessive and it's draconian. The other concern is it raises the much praised by the patron, our instant background check, from 1 business day to 3 business days. Well, let's keep it 1 business day. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Patricia Webb. I'm from Hanover County. I'm with Virginia Citizens Defense League, but I'm also a licensed firearms dealer. I can say in my experience as an FFL that many of the denials were overturned on appeal. Other denials were certain circumstances. For instance, one person had a domestic situation where there was a nasty custody battle and the lawyers didn't file the paperwork properly. The mother was supposed to be the prohibited person, and both of them ended up being a prohibited person. That person came to me, tried to buy a gun, and was subsequently flagged for arrest. And he didn't do anything wrong. He was trying to defend himself and his child. As for the 92% of gun owners favoring this law, it depends on what survey you look at. I've seen other surveys that show similar numbers of gun owners that are adamantly opposed to this law. And finally, I will say that none of these bills today would have stopped any of the previous mass murders. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, and we'll have to conclude public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is DJ Spiker with the National Rifle Association. We're beyond time, but we oppose this measure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Those, I'm sorry, won't be able to speak. Would you raise your hand if you're here and speaking to oppose this bill? Thank you very much. All right. To the committee, Delegate Ferris, you are in the queue. You're recognized.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In the use of your work, and I'll make it short, we have dart guns that we use to treat cattle. They're registered because they have a charge and they shoot a dart. It's definitely the most humane way to treat cattle, in my opinion, for illnesses. What about those guns that are in somebody else's possession?
Are you directing that toward the patron, Delegate Plum? Do you have the answer to that question?
Madam Chair, in the interest of time, let me call on the Secretary to point out specifically the definitions of firearms.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I just submit we're not changing the definition. If dart gun is the dart guns, the delegate references firearms now, there'll be firearms after the passage of this bill. It makes no difference. It does not change the definition.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
I'm sorry, Delegate Ferris, you recognize.
Yes, I'd like to offer an amendment that they would be allowed for my employees.
You move the amendment? Can you state the amendment?
That a gun used in your order of business your employees would be allowed to have that gun.
Mr. Chairman.
Hang on a second. Charles, did you Delegate Ferris is offering an amendment, and we got to figure out where's the best place to.
Oh, Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to figure out, one, if the dart gun actually is a firearm, and two, if it ought to be covered by the exception of the transfer is temporary and occurs within the continuous presence of the owner of the firearm. I'm unclear as to the situation Delegate Ferris is describing. Is the dart gun essentially, one, a firearm, and two, is his employees using it? I mean, do they own the firearm? Does Delegate Ferris own the firearm? Is the use of the firearm occurring outside Delegate Ferris's presence? So I'm uncertain if the situation he's describing isn't already covered. So if I could have a little more information, that might be helpful.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would tell him that I hope that my cattle are getting treated and taken very good care of this morning when I'm not at home. If one is sick, he'd be used to treating.
Mr. Chair, we're losing time on the clock. Shouldn't the clock stop while we are discussing an amendment or putting forth an amendment? No, the clock will run out on our time before the amendments even had a chance to be drafted or voted on. I request we put time back on the clock.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let me follow up also on the Secretary's comments. The intent here is not to redefine firearms. They're already defined in the code. So I don't know how your dart gun is defined in the code, but we haven't changed that. So the amendments being discussed is, I think, outside of the purpose and purview of this bill.
I would ask Charles. Charles, can you clarify the question that is a dart gun defined as a firearm? If it's not, then I think that the amendment doesn't make sense to offer.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I am unsure if this dart gun fires ammunition, what it fires. my instant answer would be, without full explanation of what the dart gun is that no, this is not a firearm. But I am unfamiliar with what Delegate Ferris is suggesting. So if he could, does this shoot ammunition?
Mr. Chairman, it is a firearm. We have to get them from registered firearm dealers. They shoot a charge that that's off a charge that sends a projectile to an animal and injects medicine into them, so you don't have to catch them and treat them. We use it extensively every day in our business.
And Mr. Chairman, again, it sounds more like Delegate Ferris is describing what we have defined as a stun weapon in the code, not necessarily a firearm.
Delegate Ferris, I don't, based on what Charles has stated, I don't believe that this fits under the definition of firearm, so it wouldn't require a check. So,
Mr. Chairman, I am sure of this. I promised you that I'm not the one throwing bombs. I'm asking a sincere question that this is a firearm and it's classified as so.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask Delegate Ferris, when he purchases these stun weapons, does he have to fill out the ATF transfer form when he purchasing from? Because he says he purchased them from an FFL. If he does have to fill out a firearms transfer form, it presumably would require him filling out the state form as well, which probably would be covered by this bill.
No, sir, it would not be covered by this bill. You're correct. I do have to fill out the federal forms, the state forms. My dad does. Anybody that uses these guns has to do it. And I have cattle in 3 different counties, and an employee of mine would take that gun in his truck and go and treat cattle in another place.
Mr. Chair, I'm not trying to get
legal under this bill, and if not, I'd like to offer an amendment that would make that legal.
Charles, Mr. Chair, I'm not trying to get into a running conversation with Delegate Ferris, but when I was saying that it would be covered by the bill is going to essentially require that the background check forms be filled out for every transfer. So if he's currently filling out those forms, that's what I'm saying, then yes, his what he's describing as a dart gun would be captured by this bill.
So, Mr. Chairman, would I be in violation of this legislation in July the 2nd if one of my employees took my gun and went into another farm while I was not present and treated cattle?
Charles, do you know the answer to that?
And Mr. Chairman, I believe he would be in violation. The listed exceptions do not take into account what he is suggesting.
So is Delegate Ferris, to speed this up, if you are offering an amendment to exclude dart guns, is that your amendment?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Any gun used as a tool for your job, for your employment. I mean,
Mr. Chair, if I could suggest I think the amendment probably would be better drawn to exception 6, which is the transfer is temporary and necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm, and also move that to more tailor it to the. It sounds like what he's describing is some sort of agricultural or farm use to essentially end the life of an animal that is that would be in the animal's best interest, something along those lines in concept.
All right, Delegate Ferris, is that the amendment you want to offer?
That'll work for now.
All right.
I won't promise another one later.
So you got a motion for an amendment to exclude a dart gun. Is there a second? All right.
Mr. Chairman, substitute motion. Pass by for the day.
The amendment? Pass by the amendment?
Pass by HB 2 for the day.
That's not improper. We have a motion and a second on the Delegate Ferris's amendment. Do you Do you want to pass by his amendment? All right, you withdraw your amendment. Delegate Levine?
Yes, speaking briefly to the amendment, I want to be very clear that I might support amendment if extremely narrowly tailored, not something to end the animal's life, but a dart gun to provide medicine for agricultural purposes. That amendment I would support, but nothing broader than that. And perhaps it could be developed at a later date between this bill and the floor. And I'm just speaking for myself, not for my colleagues, but I don't want this to become an exception that swamps the rule.
All right, we have an amendment that's properly seconded, offered by Delegate Ferris. Is this a recorded vote? All in favor of it, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, substitute motion, I would move to pass by that amendment because it's too broad, and therefore I urge it be passed by.
Delegate Levine, that would require 2 minutes on each side and then an ultimate vote. So I would ask you to withdraw that amendment. All in favor, say aye of the Ferris amendment. Opposed? No. All right, opinion of the chair, the noes have it. All right, Delegate Plum, I'll entertain a motion for the passage of House Bill 2 to report. Have a motion and properly second. Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you took off the time talking about the amendment, then we still have time left for...
Delegate Davis, we do not have time. We've used up all of our time. So I have a motion and a second on the... Delegate Davis, I haven't recognized you. I have a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman.
Point of order.
Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Delegate Wilt.
Mr. Chairman, you told us prior, it was noted that we ran out of time, and you said yes, time would be put back on the clock for questions.
We're asking a lot of questions now. I have no one in the queue. We have a...
Chairman, I've been in the queue.
You just got in. All right, Delegate Davis, you have the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make this really quick. There's a lot of issues with this bill, with the poorly written ones I think we have out there. I appreciate the intent of what we have, but let's keep in mind that over a quarter of 4 million job applications received in 2010 were denied because of FBI background check false information, which disproportionately discriminates against blacks and Hispanics. So I don't know what we're looking to rely on for background checks, but we do know that it disproportionately discriminates. Secondly, it was said that only the seller would be held liable, but line 415 says any person who purchases or receives a firearm from another without obtaining verification is guilty of a class 1 misdemeanor. That person is not the seller, that's the buyer, but the buyer can't verify because the only person allowed to actually look and obtain approval is the seller. So we're going to hold the buyer responsible for something that he can't even verify himself. Then if you look at, yes, I can actually transfer a weapon to my father or my mother, but God forbid I actually take a fruitcake or play a round of golf in compensation or consideration. All of a sudden you're in violation of this. Next, if the private transactions entail the buyer or seller to go to for a transfer to a licensed dealer to get the background check, but the 3-day requirement only applies for the actual state police. There's no requirement that the licensed dealer actually processes that background check in any amount of time, nor responds back to the person trying to do the transfer in any amount of time. So you could be waiting over a week or a month to get to buy a weapon via a private sale. And the last thing, probably the most important, Mr. Chairman, is we talk about temporary detention orders. And it says that if someone voluntarily agrees to admission after a temporary detention order, that they are no longer able to procure a firearm under this section. The problem is, Mr. Chairman, that we're going to actually impact people voluntarily agreeing to voluntarily go for help for mental health and mental illness issues. And I think the last thing this body wants to do is to deter someone from seeking help by passing something like this that takes away their Second Amendment rights just because they voluntarily go and seek assistance, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Davis. I have a motion properly second to report with a substitute House Bill 2. Clerk will open the roll. Clerk will close the roll. Bill reports with substitute 13-9.